Hello, and thank you for joining us on Adventures in Fly Tying by Flyfish Ohio. This is Season 6, Episode 1. I'm your host, Joe Cornwall. Welcome to another Adventures in Fly Tying episode with Flyfish Ohio. You know, one of the things I love about the winter season, well, maybe I don't love the winter season. I can't quite fish as much as I'd like to, but the winter season means it's show season. And this year, I had the opportunity to visit the Sommerset show in New Jersey back in January. You get to see some of the best fly tyers in the sport today and really come up with some very unique and original ideas. And while I was there, I saw somebody who defines original, Fishy Fullum. Fishy Fullum has had an article in Fly Tyer magazine now for years, and he's always been known for being unbelievably creative and coming up with some new patterns. And this January, he showed me a pattern that I'm very excited about. He described it as a bonefish pattern and said that it was absolutely magical in the way it fished. Let's take a look. This is Fishy's bonefish pattern. It's about as simple as can be. It's nothing more than a simple body, and in fact, as his original, it was a thread body, and I've modified that with a little bit of D-rib or jelly cord. A polar fiber wing, marked with a little bit of a marker, and a unique product called Spanflex, which is really kind of a rubbery hackle or a rubbery floss that we're using. But what makes this pattern so cool, and you can see I've tied it up in a couple of different colors here, is this. Fishy put in a double set, or what I call a double truck, of bead chain eyes. That way when the fly drops to the bottom, it always lands sitting there on its own little tripod, on its own little base. And he recommends that when you fish the fly, find a cruising fish, cast in front of him, drop the fly down, and don't move it. Just let the fly do its own magic. When I saw this, my first thought was, this is a carp pattern that's absolutely going to crush. I have to tie it. And I think we're going to have a great season with this. So why don't you join us and tie a few up for yourself and post some responses on our Flyfish Ohio Facebook fan page and let us know how you do with this fly. Fishy, thanks for showing me this one. What a great pattern. Here's the materials that we're going to use. We're going to use a mustad stainless steel size 6. This is a S74 hook. 4X long. You could use Mustad 3366, and that's in fact what I used to tie the green version there if you're tying in fresh water. Just a ring eye or a down eye, size 4 or size 6 really should work well for you. So nothing particular on the hook. We're going to use black bead chain. You can buy this at most hardware stores, and I bought this for about $3 for a 1-yard piece, which is enough for dozens and dozens of flies. The material that's going to make the wing, polar fiber. In this case, we're using polar fiber in a shrimp color, but you could use a ginger, a tan, a brown, an olive, whatever works. Try and match the bait or the bottom in the area where you're fishing. For smallmouth and for bonefish, I think orange is a great way to go, so this shrimp color should be perfect. And of course, the bead chain in black imitates the shrimp or crayfish eyes. And then that special material is called Spanflex. What we're using here is Spanflex and ginger. And as you can see, this is a rubbery, not real stretchable, but a rubbery kind of an opaque material that's really designed for a nymph body. But used like this, it's just a really neat deal, because when this is sitting on the bottom, all those rubber legs are moving with every little tiny vibration of the water column. Let's go ahead and tie one and see how this comes up. Very, very easy, very creative tie. Start by mounting the hook in your vise, and in this case I'm using a flat waxed, this is a fluorescent orange Flymaster Plus thread. Bring that on right behind the hook eye and just wrap a thread body all the way back to, well, right above the hook, the hook's barb. Should be about the right point. Now, what Fishy did with his is he basically said that was the body. He tied a thread body and wrapped back up and began tying the fly, and I have absolutely no reason to doubt that that's more than enough of a body. But it didn't quite feel complete for me. So I modified it with one simple thing. I'm using this. This is a jelly cord. You could use D-rib or a nymph rib or any of those kinds of things. You could actually use clear monofilament, would certainly work. Some 20 or 30 pound monofilament would certainly work. And I think this just adds a little bit of sparkle and shine like a shell from a shellfish would. It just makes the fly look a little bit more complete for me. So I start by tying that on at the midpoint of the hook, wrapping thread neatly over it, and I'm not putting any pressure on that jelly cord till I get to the back where it's tied in, and then bring my thread back, forming a really smooth thread underbody, because that underbody is going to show through the translucent D-rib, and I think it gives it a kind of a nice effect there. one wrap behind that body and then bring the D-rib up. And if you put pressure on this, you can actually form a tapered body. I'm going to let it relax and form a full-size body. You can see that that is just a nice kind of a segmented, translucent, kind of a shiny, it almost looks like the carapace of a shrimp or of a crayfish. And this really fits right in with what we do at Fly Fish Ohio and with my personal theory of fly tying, and that is suggestion. I love things that suggest life. I'm not a big fan of ultra-realistic flies or flies that have a lot of steps, because you're not tempted to fish them in the places where you should be, which is in the rocks and all that. The faster a fly can be tied, the more likely you are to fish it where it's going to do for its best work on fish. So you can see we have a nice little body right there. Now I'm going to take my 4 eyes and tie that right in front of the body with some crisscross wraps, just a few each way. Once again, this is a lightly weighted fly with synthetic materials. It doesn't hold a lot of water. Very easy to fish on a 5 or 6 weight, or if you're fishing for bonefish, on a 7 or 8 weight on the flat. So it's aerodynamic. And we're ready to go there. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add just a drop of Sally Hansen's just to that little portion right there, so that we can kind of make sure that those threads are really locked in. I'll go ahead and just use a little bit of leftover material to sop up the extra. And that gives me a nice secure tie-in point. Go ahead and invert the hook, or if you're using a true rotary vise, just go ahead and rotate it. Now, the polar fiber is pretty interesting. What you want to do here is you want to get a fairly good piece of polar fiber to use for that wing. You're going to cut off a much larger piece than you think you're going to need, because when you cut that off, you're going to see how incredibly tapered that is. Now here's the trick. Loosely holding the tips, you're going to pull that taper out and stack it. Get the tips together again, pull that taper out and then stack it. Get the tips together again, pull that out, and get rid of all that really short fuzz, which can make a nice dubbing or another material if you want to do that. And that's about all that I need. I really don't need much more than that. Cut that extra material off. We'll tie that on right there in front of the eyes. Make kind of a smooth ramp. You don't want to have a big steep, so tie in a little bit longer butts, because you want to have an area to put that floss. Make a smooth thread. Now, that's the wing. You can see it just comes back and barely covers the hook. We really don't need any more than that. Now I'm going to add a little bit of interest or a little bit of detail. I'm using a prism color marker. And I'm just going to make a couple of bars on that. Just add a little bit of striping or kind of a pattern. Very few things that live in the water have one solid color. They always tend to have some kind of a pattern. I think that just makes it look a little bit more shrimpy, if you will. Now, the Spanflex, and this is kind of an interesting material to work with. You can't really take 1 or 2 pieces. What you want to do is take the 6 or 7 pieces that you're going to use. And I've got maybe a little bit too much right there. We'll just cut a couple off. There we go, 6 or 7 pieces. And you want them to be just a little longer, and maybe about 1.5 times the hook. Cut those off. Now it's very, very easy. You're not going to tie these on in any kind of a magical formula. You're going to tie them on right in the middle with a couple of tight wraps. You'll see that those legs will begin to stand right up as they compress. It's exactly what you want to do. You can go ahead and move those around. Make sure that you've got, keep them all on the top. Go to the front, form that neat tapered head underneath there. And that'll help those to stand up. And then just go ahead and throw your whip finish underneath those legs. Little drop of Sally Hansen's on top of that will seal that thread nicely. And isn't that about as easy as it gets? You can just go crazy with colors. You can go crazy with different shades. You can mix different shades. You could use a natural fur if you wanted to for that wing. Very much a style of tying, but Fishy Fullum from Fly Tyer Magazine, this is his Bonefish fly, and he swears that it was the most effective bonefish fly that he's ever tied. When a guy like Fishy Fullum tells you it's the most effective fly that he's ever fished, let me tell you what, if I'm heading south for bonefish, this one's going to be in my kit. But it's going to be in my kit for every carp fishing outing, and I suspect that maybe the rock bass and the smallies might like this one as well. Definitely something worth taking a look at. Fishy's Bonefish fly. Thanks so much for joining us. Till next time, tight lines.